Today I'll be showing you how I painted a Loyalist World Eater, continuing my sanguinary heresy headcanon thing. I gave him the bare head from the Primaris Lieutenant Malleus figure to show that he doesn't have nails, as well as I gave him a Black Templar bolter because the World Eaters invented the chain your weapon to yourself thing the Black Templars adopted. After a primer white, I painted his shoulder pads and backpack with Prussian blue by Vallejo. I guess if he was a sergeant and you gave him a helmet, painted a blue stripe on it. I painted his skin with heavy skin tone by Vallejo, and then base coated the areas that will be gold later with it. Then I went over the areas that will be gold with retributor armor. Also, I painted his gun with Black Templar contrast paint for some reason, because I end up just using Deco Arts Black to paint his bolters, casing, and all the other areas that will be silver, and in between armor bits. Paint the silver areas with chainmail silver. Ironically, for the actual chain, I used some Iron Warriors. Instead of giving him a normal Khorne base, I decided to paint it with skrag brown. Clean up the white, then shade it with Apothecary white contrast paint. Shade the base and the skin with strong tone, shade the silver or dark tone, shade the gold with seraphim sepia. And after a matte varnish, here he is. And for my headcanon, how I would have Angron go loyal is going way back to when his pod first went out into the galaxy, falling to Luceria. Something hit Angron's pod and he landed in a nobleman's house. That thing he hit because warp shenanigans turns out to be Angron from the Prime Universe, who gets knocked back into the warp and sent back. His alternate Angron grows up similar to Gilgaman and Porto Rabo as a nobleman's son, but being Luceria, he spends most of his time watching gladiatorial combat, which Angron loves. He loves watching it and even joining in sometimes. But eventually he starts actually talking to the gladiators and finds out they're living very poor lives and getting experimented on. Eventually he realizes it's all kind of messed up to watch people fight to the death, so he helps lead the gladiator revolt, which doesn't go exactly well for him. But the Emperor and the Custodians beam down and helps him rather than abducts him. The World Eaters, despite their name, become a very kind chapter that actually cares about civilian life. And because Angron isn't poisoned by the Butcher's nails, he actually has his power of empathy. Despite this, he's still a great warrior, though, and helps fight in the Siege of Terra. Afterwards, the World Eaters are a Codex non-compliant chapter, believing it to be a little too restrictive and hurting the Marines' individuality. So instead of having a veteran company, 4 battle companies, 4 reserve, and a scout company, the World Eaters end up having sort of similar but different 10 companies that all sort of act like independent chapters from each other, with all their own scouts and veterans. And like all Primarchs, Angron goes MIA for a while. Here during the War of the Beast, he kind of disappears similar to Vulcan in canon, leaving behind Gorechild, which becomes a relic for the chapter.